preparing a large webinar streaming live on YouTube. Let's begin the broadcast. Of us are here in office. We're preparing a large webinar. Okay. So we are live on, okay. We have participants are joining us at this time. We want to welcome everyone as you begin to log on to our More Than a Hashtag, Preserving the Black Lives Matter movement in a digital age. We're just going to give it just a few moments as people begin to come on so that we can get started and everybody can participate. Right now to my panelists, just to let you know, on the YouTube Live, it is showing everyone's screen at this time. Okay, so we're going to get started here today. We don't want to labor everyone's time. Just want to welcome you on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Black Archives History and Research Foundation of South Florida, Incorporated. We are certainly excited. The Black Archives is a repository for a photographic and manuscript repository that documents the life of Blacks in Miami and South Florida from 1896 to present. The Black Archives was started by a wonderful founder, Dr. Dorothy Jenkins Fields, who is joining us here today on this panel to discuss this important matter before museums and archival institutions across our country. We're excited to be taking the lead on this issue, and we hope that other institutions will join us as we begin to talk about this documentation process. So we have several panelists before us. We thought about this project at the start of the protest with George Floyd, and immediately thoughts of local protests and civil unrest that happened in Miami came to our mind as a staff, beginning with the Republican riots in Miami, but most importantly, the unrest in Miami that paralleled George Floyd's situation, being the Arthur McDuffie protests and the Neville Johnson unrest in Miami and others. Now, with all the recent events of this country, we thought to shift the focus some to discuss the large context, mainly on how cultural institutions and archives are handling the information being produced about the unrest, and to look back on how the information was processed in the past and how we can better document the exchange and the collection of information in the present. With the increased attention on institutional racism, police brutality, protests, and how all of this influences our cultural institutions, I would like to discuss the significance of centering Black lives and experiences in museums and archives, and the challenges of working against the powers at institutions and the media that seek to erase, marginalize, or whitewash Black histories and experiences. The first part of our panel, we wanted to introduce to you our archival staff. We're going to start the discussion. We have before us staff in the archives, Jocelyn Hurtado, which is our archivist. We have Louis Burton, which is our assistant archivist. We have Alicia Melton, who is our community outreach archivist, and our staff specialist, Devon Atkins, is with us today. We're excited about this team that we have. And I just want to start first allowing them to introduce themselves and give just a brief background on their studies and who they are. So we're going to start with Jocelyn. Hello, Jocelyn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jocelyn Hurtado. I am the archivist at the Black Archives History and Research Foundation. I've been here for 4 years, and I actually have a bachelor's degree in anthropology. It actually focuses on archaeology. And my job is to preserve and make available the history of Black South Florida. So I help researchers view the collections, and I also am in charge in processing collections that we receive through donations.
Thank you. And I did forget, blame it on my head and not my heart, our program operations manager, Ms. Camila Pritchett, who is with us, who will be joining us, giving us some insight from the street and education-wise. Camila, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, my name is Camila Pritchett. I am the Operations and Programming Manager at the Black Archives. I've been at the Archives since 2013, And my work at the archive started in 2013, but my family's presence at the archive pre-existed my coming to the archives, as they are a long-standing Miami family. So to be able to get into the archives and learn about Miami's history has been something that has definitely enriched my life.
All right, thank you so much. We now will turn the camera to Mr. Lewis Burton.
Hi, I'm Louis Berthen. I am the assistant archivist at the Black Archives, and I graduated from FIU with a bachelor's in history. And I actually started as an intern doing processing of collections at the archives, and I was lucky enough to get a job with you guys. So thank you for that. And
okay, I want to turn the camera over to some of our newest members of our staff. That would be in the personality of Miss Alicia Melton.
Good evening. I'm Alicia Melton. I am the Archives Outreach Administrator. I just started. I've been here 4 months, and I have my master's in library science with a concentration in archives from North Carolina Central University. And so my job is to process, make sure we get more, acquire more materials, and reference services.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Last but not least, Mr. Devin Atkins, who is on the newer side. Devin, can you give us some background on who you are?
Yes, definitely. My name is Devon Atkins. I've started here a little bit, going into a month now. I graduated from Raff University as a history major. Yeah, and I'm just excited to have this discussion with you guys. So very informative.
Okay, well, we're going to get right into it. Our format is open discussions as we get started. And I'm going to lend the first question, I guess, to our staff before we bring on our other panelists. And we did so much. First, I guess we could talk to Jocelyn Hurtado, our archivist. What is our collection policy if people were wanting to know how to access and things of that nature? Can you give us some insight on that, please?
Yes, of course. So I'm actually pulling up our collection policy right now, and I'm gonna read directly from our sheet. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay, so our collection policy basically states, I'm so sorry, my phone just dropped down. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, so our collection policy basically states that we are looking to intake materials that help tell the story of the Black experience in South Florida. Since Miami was incorporated in 1896, usually our collections, we look for materials that are date from 1896 all the way to the modern day. And it can include, for example, telling the story of segregation, Black neighborhoods, churches, communities, events, different individuals. And so yes, but that is constantly changing. For example, we are focusing on capturing history as it happens, and we definitely look to capture the modern day stories as well.
Okay. So I guess I'll pose this to all of us. What are some of the relevant collections that you have found in the Black Archives holding that possibly reflect today's climate? And that's open to anyone on our staff that's aware of them.
So we have the Civil Rights Collection, which is one of our most popular collection. It has newspaper, regarding the civil rights movement, particular to the South Florida area. And it also has a lot of newspaper clippings regarding the riots that happened over the year in the community. We also have various other collections, for example, the Civil Rights Collection. This collection has a lot of informative journals, books on the topic of civil rights, and also has a lot of commission reports as well.
Okay. So I guess, Camila, can you interject a little bit on, I know you're a history buff as well. Why do you feel it's important to document the history?
Well, I think it's important on the, on the micro level for someone like me who grew up in Miami, and it took for me really coming to the Black Archives to learn things not only about my community, but even people who are related to me. So the fact that this information, were it not for the Black Archives, I would not have come across it because they aren't necessarily teaching this history in school. I think it's important now for the community at large. I think it's definitely important because this is not information that is streamlined into the school system. This is stuff that, during Black History Month, we have all the schools and people come out to the Black Archives to get that information that they aren't exposed to, and their teachers don't have readily available because it's not in the textbooks and it's not in the mainstream educational tools that are being given to our children. So I think that specifically so that future generations after we're gone will know the true history of what happened. And I feel just from having experienced a great education, however, there was a lot of things lacking dealing with my culture. I think that having those tools available to children of the community would enrich their lives and allow them to be more connected to the people who, paved the way in Black Miami and Miami at large.
So, seeing the climate of the day of what's going on, and we're going to dive into the historical concept very soon as we get ready soon to bring on Dr. Dorothy Jenkins Fields. First of all, what do you, and this is to any of our archival staff, what do you feel the role of the archives is? And then as well as, I want to know what are you guys doing to document this history that's happening as we're going forward? And who deems what's important to collect?
So before my colleagues start taking that up, I actually did want to kind of talk about that point because that's a good question. And I think conversely, it's just as good to ask, it's not who deems what important, but who deems what unimportant, because that's also a lot of what has happened with our history. And a lot of stories have been lost because people didn't fit in their narrow view of history. It wasn't, and a lot of our history for a long time was focused on great white men. So not taking that narrow view of history and keeping out everyone else has given us a very narrow view of what our own history is in this country, specifically here in Miami too. Like I'm a product, like to what Camila was saying, I'm a product of the Miami-Dade public school system. And I didn't know anything about Black Miami or our leaders or who fought for what. And that is a failure of the education system. So my colleagues can pick it up from there, but.
So at the Black Archives, we have for over 42 years, we have been collecting materials directly from the community. And for us, it's our job to preserve the history. We do not deem what is unimportant and what is important. That's up to the researcher who's viewing the collection and viewing the materials. But we do have, our donation policy. We look for materials related to the South Florida area to tell the history of the Black community, whether it's the African American community, the Caribbean Black community, the Latin Afro-Latino community, and it's our job to preserve those documents and make sure that they're available for future generations to come.
So, go ahead, Alicia. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you can hear me. And I also just want to touch on the importance that our archive is considered a community archive. And usually you have community archives because
I think we lost Alicia.
We lost Alicia? Okay. And she was going to touch on community archives, and that's something we're definitely going to dive in with Dr. Fields. But I guess not. Is she back? Okay. I'm going to hold that community archives. That's definitely something I want to hear from Dr. Fields on about the community archives, the person who started this in 1977. So it's a great segue at this point if you find that we want to introduce Dr. Dorothy Jenkins Fields, who is the founder of the Black Archives. And I'm just certainly thankful that she was able to take a moment to come on board with us and participate. I know she has a very busy schedule. and having her here is very important. So Dr. Fields, are you with us?
Absolutely, and I have my coconut trees uh, in the background, and you see the water. I'm just having a wonderful time.
Great, great. Well, Doc, we're glad to have you here, and we want to pick up off of where Ms. Melton was beginning to talk about a community archive. And I know from my experience that has become a topic of discussion. I always like to say that, you know, all of a sudden Black history is now sexy to everybody now. But you started this archives in 1977, when there was definitely a fight, and we're still fighting. But you know, many of these, I know these archives began to come out of the Black Power movement. Can you talk about what led you to start the archives?
Well, first, I want to congratulate you and the staff for the tremendous work that you are doing. I am just excited to see the fact that we have a staff, that we have a professional staff, and they're all doing such a wonderful job. I'm really, really excited about that, and very, very grateful, Tim, to you for holding on and moving forward. Camila, Jocelyn, all of you. It's in this day and time and in this climate, to still be up and about, and you all are all over social media. I'm hearing about it and I'm seeing it when I can, and it's great. And so one of the questions you asked earlier when you sent them to me was describe the work that you do. It's important that you know, and those who I'm meeting for the first time, how I connect what I do now with what I've done in the past. For more than 40 years, I continue to identify for scholarship and research purposes. Remember those two things, scholarship and research purposes. Documents, images, and other primary sources that tell the story of Miami-Dade County's Black community from 1896 to the present. And when I say Miami-Dade County and they say South Florida, we're talking about the same thing, because there was a time that the county stretched all the way to Juneau in West Palm Beach. So as a certified archivist, public historian, journalist, event planner, I do this through family and class reunions, churches, civic, fraternal, and social organizations and businesses. I am also the founder, owner, president, and CEO of Society Socials and Reunions, LLC. In addition, as a consultant to the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, I'm working with Dr. Margaret Vance and her team at the John P. Hushman Institute for Genomics. The goal is to provide community-based participation for African Americans with Alzheimer's disease. Well, how did she get into all of that? It all started with collecting the primary sources, collecting documents, photographs, images that from the people themselves. Too many times with community archives, other people tell your story. And it's always important to me that we tell our story ourselves. And so my focus continues after all of these years is to identify primary source materials, including oral histories, for historical researchers and scholars. In that regard, I encourage individuals and families who are downsizing and right-sizing to start now going through their church and school programs that we've all collected, obituaries and other material evidence. We're talking about material evidence that they have collected or created during the 20th century, and to offer their materials as donations to the Black Archives to build our collection. So downsizing and right-sizing, people who are getting rid of things. We've lost so many people. We have, as the archives has been growing, we have not had the staff that we have now to go into the community and to collect some of those things. So many things have been lost, but there are grandchildren and great-grandchildren out there who still have things. And I'm going to, as we move through this process, talk about some of the research projects that that still need to be done that predate Neville Johnson and predate McDuffie. You see, starting with McDuffie and Neville Johnson, you're starting in the middle of the story. You know me, Tim.
Oh, wow, Doc. Wow, yes.
We have to start at the beginning.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes, and I don't know whether you want me to mention those or not, but well, let me mention some.
Mention them, Doc, please.
Yeah, let me mention some research things, ideas that have really been on my mind. Understand that growing up in Miami, my grandparents settled here in 1903, just about 7 years after Flagler extended the railroad from Palm Beach, from the Bahamas, not Palm Beach, the Bahamas. After Flagler extended the railroad, seven years, not from the Bahamas or Palm Beach, but extended. And so my grandmother, every day I would hear my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, my uncles talk about their daily experiences. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, was one of the washerwomen who told stories about walking across the railroad tracks to collect soiled clothes from the tourists and bringing them back and staying up all night washing and ironing and getting them ready. Of course, that was before washers and dryers. She brought them back to a 3-room home that she and my grandfather eventually bought and lived with 7 children at 159 Northwest 10th Street, about 2 blocks north of the Lyric. It was those stories that impressed me that I wanted to record growing up. I didn't have any details. I had no idea how I would do it, but I wanted to tell the stories that I heard. I just had a desire to record not only the stories from my family, but the other stories in Colored Town, because Colored Town was self-contained. It had hotels and all the goods and services that you would need. You've read about it, but it's true. Someone asked me, you all made that up. That didn't, no, it's hard to believe now when you see it. And I know that Tim is developing an exhibit. Jocelyn's doing some research that will eventually show what it really was. We had celebrities coming in and out. All of this was a dream. I remember seeing Nat King Cole, just celebrities in the afternoon after school. And of my grandparents' 7 children, 4 were teachers, 2 were medical doctors, and 1 lawyer who later became the 2nd Black judge in Miami and the 4th in the state of Florida. So they had stories that just running out of their ears. And it was for me to tell the story from what they said. For instance, they talked about the courthouse before 1920, early days when there were hangings behind the old courthouse, and Black parents were told to take the children. And not only told, everybody had to go and watch the hangings.
Wow.
Not possibly, it was a form of intimidation. So you see, this hasn't started. I mean, this didn't just start. The riots didn't just start. They started because of what the people have had to go through for so many generations before 1980.
Oh.
I was told that by my aunt, who was a knee baby. She was a knee baby, and my grandmother was walking, and my grandmother was carrying Uncle Fred, the lap baby. And she said we had to walk from 159 Northwest 10th Street to the back of where the courthouse is now, because that's where they had the hangings.
Wow.
We had a neighbor who was blinded by law enforcement with brass knuckles because he talked back to the police. His relatives are still around. He has a son who's still around. That's the kind of oral history that I have been trying to get. I wanted to get to these people, their families, before we lost them, so we could get their firsthand stories. What about the police riding on horseback to our family's porch? Again, 159 Northwest 10th Street. The police would ride through Colortown on horseback. And when they got to our home, evidently my uncle's dog was barking, and the police shot through the window, killed the dog that my uncle was holding. My uncle was about 8 years old at that time. That's the uncle who later went to the Florida Baptist Academy to finish high school, because there was no high school in Miami for him or for any of the Black children. The Florida Baptist Academy, of course, has now relocated and is Florida Memorial University in Miami Gardens. He then went to FAMC for a year or two, then to Morehouse. And his junior year took a medical exam, and without finishing college, he was the only one of the 7 we always laughed who never finished college, went directly to Meharry Medical School and became a medical doctor. Came back to Miami, and many things happened. Finally built a clinic, the X-ray clinic, which still remains in Miami. That's the uncle who, if he had made a wrong turn when he was 8 years old, when the police on horseback rode up on our porch and probably other porches too, and shot through the window. This is the first Black radiologist just in Miami.
Wow.
Built a clinic and saved many lives. Over many decades, innocent Black people have been beaten and killed just because they were Black and in the wrong place. Now, this is the last one that I want you to think about for historical researchers and scholars as you think about collecting and try to identify from the community. Who were the women who washed and ironed the hoods and gowns of the KKK?
Wow. Wow.
The nights the KKK was expected to run through Overtown on horseback, my grandmother said the night was that day, that afternoon was always very quiet. Word would get around that Colortown, that the hoods and gowns were laid out, that the washerwomen had been told to get the hoods out. They weren't told why, but they knew that it meant that there was going to be a ride through Overtown that night. So the children were all washed and fed early and put to bed early, so that to keep them out of harm's way. Who were and so their great-grandchildren and grandchildren who have information. I've read about it once in an obituary in one of the papers. There was something about a grandmother who had been who admitted to being one of the women, washerwomen. And so those are the kinds of stories that you will not get otherwise. In a community archives, the stories from the people, from their everyday lives and experiences, are the stories that will tell the story of the 20th and the 21st century for current and future generations.
So Doc, interesting. That is so important, what you've been sharing. And, you know, those stories, I vaguely heard those when I started at the archives about the, and again, we're going with this more than a hashtag, these episodes that's happened in Miami, where Miami is known to be South, but not that South, many people would say. You know, because we talk about that this is a tourist city and some of the things that they don't want to get out about Miami. But how do we, what advice you'll give us as we continue to try to find those stories that goes beyond McDuffie and the Republican riots? I've heard Uncle John. I was fortunate enough to thank you for so much for introducing me to Uncle John before he passed. To hear him talk about his stories and those things that you just talked about. But you know, how do we gather that information, and you know, what direction or recommendation you can get us to bring that information in?
You have to ask. And sometimes families will know. There's always one historian in every family. There's someone who has been keeping the record. And unfortunately, many times we don't ask. We encourage the children to talk with your grandparents, not so much talk with them, listen to them and ask them questions. And there are people in the church who will know. It's an arduous process, but it's worth the effort to ask. And many times they will put you off at first, but if you ask again and let them know it's for historical purpose. So many times, I know in our community, especially, they say, oh girl, don't ask me about that. Oh, we don't talk about that. You say it's for research. We need it for the future. We need it to help tell the whole story. And we just have to go after it.
And as we tell this story, and of course, the civil unrest that existed and the intimidation that was led by Miami police, I always say that police traded their hoods in for badges. The KKK traded their hoods in for badges. I can get in trouble for saying that, but in many reasons that's very true. I see Terrence. Terrence, we'll talk about that. Lou Kramer from the Wolfsonian, the Moving Image Library, is here with us today, and that's a great way to tie her in, because tell us a little bit about yourself, Lou, and then about some of the footage that you have, because we're hearing the words from Dr. Fields that talks about this lost history, but in many cases, I'm not going to bore you. I shared with my staff a clip from what was the Clone Wars, Star Wars, when he was looking for a planet at the archives. It's the only time they talk about the archives in the movie The Star Wars, and he couldn't find a planet. And the archivist said, you know, well, if it's not in the archives, that means it doesn't exist. But because you have the footage that show and document a lot of this history, it's difficult to tell the truth. Like most recently, you know, our 45th made a statement about, you know, if you start looting, you know, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. You know, and people were able to go back into the archives and find out where that statement come from. So there's no way he could have been able to change his stance on that statement, because the images and the footage and the interview was there. So please introduce yourself, Lou.
Well, I'm Lou Kramer. I'm the archives manager at it's the Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives at Miami-Dade College. So it's a very long name. But what we have is a collection of historical films and videos about Florida. The biggest chunk of the collection is news material from what at the time was Channel 4, WTVJ. It's, you know, now NBC6. But it was back then its own independent station owned by the Wolfson family. And we have the collection of the news material that was shot by WTVJ. So it includes 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and a little bit into the 90s. So it's all historical footage, and it chronicles the civil rights movement. It chronicles the Cuban influx, the various riots, the civil unrest, a lot of coverage on the McDuffie riots, and some footage on the Neville Johnson protests. And I think in terms of rioting, when you compare Neville Johnson with McDuffie, they were pivotal moments in the history of Miami, because television cameras caught what was happening. In 1968, there were riots during the Republican National Convention about poverty. The Black community protested because of the living conditions being so terrible in a lot of areas in Miami. And part of that had to do with Interstate 95 cutting through Overtown and destroying a vital part of the community and creating these slum areas. So we have film footage of the 1968 riots, but the big difference when 1980 happens with the McDuffie riots, there's cameras everywhere, relatively speaking, because you have the news station there doing live reports. You know, they're recording everything that happens. There's, you know, aerial shots of the city on fire. And same thing with Neville Johnson. I can show you a few clips. Let me see. Like the Neville Johnson coverage is interesting because it was like news footage.
He was caught completely by surprise. Several people who said they saw the shooting agreed. The youth they identified as Neville Johnson offered no resistance. Police said he had a gun in his belt and ignored a police order to freeze. The crowd thought Johnson had been shot dead, though he is reported.
Lou, we're seeing your file screen, but we're not seeing the footage.
Grew outside these barricades. Members of Metro's crisis response team
I'm trying to get, oh, there, you see it? Okay, I don't know what's happening.
Miami's field force, helmeted and outfitted with clubs, appeared briefly to the east, but they were withdrawn in hopes of keeping passions down.
Okay, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. But anyway, the idea is that with there's a big difference between the early news footage because it was shot on film and it was, you know, they had to shoot it on film and then run it to the lab and develop it. And then it would show up on the air later, whenever the newscast would air. But with the McDuffie riots, the cameras were there because it was portable news gathering. And I think that's one of the important things about archives is we have collected that material, and if WTVJ had not saved it, we wouldn't have that footage. We wouldn't have that history, even going back to, you know, 1950s, back to the civil rights movement, all the footage of the Martin Luther King Jr. speeches that he made in various parts in Miami throughout several years. We wouldn't have the coverage of like Sammy Davis Jr. addressing the Brownsville Community Center when he talked about, you know, he points out that maybe, you know, there's a 5-year-old young person in the audience who might be thinking about being president one day. And ironically, Obama would have been 5 years old in that year that Sammy Davis Jr. made that statement. And we wouldn't have that if the TV station had not saved it. The same can't be said about other stations in Miami because they didn't all save the same amount of material. They maybe saved a few special programs and such, but in terms of the raw news footage, that's very critical to the study and understanding of Miami's history, at least from a television news point of view. And sometimes that's the only image there is. There might be photographs, but really the moving images brings the stories to life.
Tim, may I just add something to that? That was excellent and brought back so many memories. It was Ralph Rennick, who was the longtime newscaster who saved every newscast that he did, Ralph Rennick. And behind him came Gregory Bush, historian, University of Miami, and the late Arva Moore Parks McCabe, who insisted that that collection be archived. And they're the ones who worked to do it and to get it to Miami-Dade Community College.
Right.
So that certainly needs to be said, and thank Ms. Kramer for that. I have one thing that I would like to ask her to please look for Virginia Key Beach. There is a segment of Garth Reeves and Father Gibson walking on the beach, getting ready to threatening to put their swimsuits on to go in the water.
I was trying to, yeah, Camilla had mentioned that, and I was trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. Of course, I don't have access. I mean, I have access to certain things, but I don't have access to go back into the original film and look for the sex. So I tried to find it based on various keywords and such, and
Yes.
I couldn't locate it.
Mhm.
But I did find there was a segment about Reverend Gibson talking about Crandon Park and, you know,
Yes.
threatening that some action was going to happen, but it's not, you know, it's not the shot of.
You don't see
Garth
it.
Reeves.
Well, keep it on your bucket list. It exists.
No,
and
I'm sure it's there. Yeah, it's just gotta
Yes.
find it.
We were trying to put it in the film Miami the Magic City, the original film, but for some reason it was cut. So it's there. And if you'll just put it on your bucket list, Jocelyn, for researchers. Sometimes researchers are looking, students are looking for research projects. That might be something. Yes. All right, Tim.
Those questions toward the end. I want to segue just a moment because Dr. Phil said it, and I heard Lou say it again. We're looking at the varying differences in protests. And I came across a film, I Am Not Your Negro, that talks about James Baldwin and his how he communicated with Malcolm X. And I don't know if everybody's seeing, and in it, I was amazed at the imagery. And so when you talk about footage, I don't know if everybody see this on the screen right now, where it says race mixing is communism, stop the race mixing. Is that what everyone sees now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what was interesting when you talk about documenting the history, and I want to talk a little bit about the differences as we get ready to bring in Sandino to me, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Sandino, and we're going to talk about his imagery. In that film, it showed a lot of protests. When they talk about protests today of the Black Lives Matter movement, and when you see these images from the Black Lives Matter, what they show on the television, and they talk about how savage blacks are, the people that are protesting. When you look at some of those images from the civil rights movement and of the people that don't look like us that were protesting, it was terrible. And I'm just pulling up some of these that I've come across, some of the signs that they had and how violent they were against people that were just trying to go to school. It was amazing. So that difference between what they identify the protest today compared to what was happening yesterday. And in the film, James Baldwin mentioned, he said that when a white man said, "Give me liberty or give me death," everybody stand up and applaud. But if a black man says, "Give me liberty or give me death," they will villainize him. And easily we forget about the history of that statement. So I was just showing this, and I was just some of the imagery that was happening then, and somehow violent white people have been to blacks in protest. It's like we have short-term memory. Sandino, I want to share. I want to introduce Sandino. If you could tell us just a little bit about yourself, Sandino, and I know you have some imagery that you would like to share with us today.
All right, hello, like everyone. Like, my name is Sandino Timmy. I'm a visual artist, and I use photography as my medium to be able to tell stories. And my main focus is the story of Black people, and just in general, whether it be love, whether it be like our walk through some of these times and these journeys trying to gain our freedom, and things of that sort. So as like Ms. Barber like mentioned earlier, like I had an opportunity to capture the protest back in 2014. This was when, you know, like Trayvon Martin, and then it was Eric Gardner, and we had Mike Brown, and so on and so forth. So like I literally, I think like I was just at home. I got done like with a job, and I saw like a bunch of people going out and they're protesting all these killings at the hands of police across the country. And at the time, I realized with photography and just storytelling, like just in general, that like the narrative that is told is almost as important, if not more important, than what actually happened. So as I would watch mainstream media, I would see them portray what was happening on the ground in a different light. When I looked at the crowds that were there on all these different big networks, what I saw was people coming together to like speak towards our brown and black brothers like being killed unjustly by law enforcement. So I took it upon myself to get up and get out and capture like the narrative, like from the ground surface, so we can have something to be able to show to like the future generations like to come of what we did as my generation, because I gained like a lot of my inspiration from Gordon Parks and what he did for his generation, as far as being able to capture imagery and leave behind things that are legacy, you know, and it shows us like from strength, like it shows our ability to come together as people. And then when I would look at similar to the images that Mr. Barber shared, I looked at those images and I saw some of the same things happening on the ground in 2014. Actually, some of the same signs and things of that sort. So like I ended up putting together, I just went out. I got a call, like, well, not even a call, like I was on social media, which is how we, you know, like receive most of our information nowadays. And one of my friends started this organization called the Dream Defenders here down in South Florida. Back in 2002, like it actually spawned from an organization that I was a part of in college that was called the Student Coalition for Justice. And one of our first, I guess, cases that we took on, not really, like we're just college students, and it was a year after Facebook like was created. So we utilized social media to galvanize students to protest like the killing of a Black boy named Martin Lee Anderson at a boot camp in Pensacola, Florida. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that story. So like literally it's just a couple of friends like sitting down, and at the time like Ben Crump like was up in Tallahassee, and like he was doing some of this some of this civil work like as well. But we took it upon ourselves as students to take action as to what was going on like with the verdict. So like a lot of you know, like the blocking of the streets and the disrupting traffic. Like we did that back in 2005 in Tallahassee, Florida, in order to bring attention to this. And we also was able to set up a sit-in in the governor's office. Well, actually like a sleep-in. Like we stayed there for like weeks until people came down and spoke to us. And we were actually able to force the Department of Justice to come down and speak to a whole bunch of college students. So like that was like my beginning as it comes to social justice, like activism. And then like a couple of fellas actually spawned down and moved down to South Florida, and they began the Dream Defenders. And so like this was early on in the Dream Defenders like journey. And then like the protest starts. So I was busy, you know, like with my photography and traveling. So like I wasn't able to be as involved as I wanted to, but I knew that I had a skill set that I can give to humanity that can be like seen and used beyond whatever my physical form is. So I took it upon myself to go out there because I felt like I was obligated to do so. I seen all these people protesting, and like what right like did I have to stay home, especially like with me having like this skill set. So I went out there in 2014, didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just went out there and I felt like I had to tell the story for us, and ended up just, you know, like trying to reach out to somebody. I had no idea like where to, you know, any of the rules or like how to put together a show. I went to Wynwood, you know, like to like try to see if someone would give me an opportunity. Everyone really just, you know, like didn't even listen to what I had to say or to see like the images, but I would tell anybody and anybody, you know, like anybody that would listen about them. And then eventually, like I was able to get in contact with Miss Pritchett, and I presented my idea like to her, and then she in turn got me in contact with Miss Barber and like put together the proposal, and I was able to put together like the first No More, like my first exhibition, which was called the No More Blues from the Boys in Blue. That was like my play on it, because when I went out there, I just felt like just like the sorrow of everything like that was going on, and you know, like art inspires art. So music a lot of times like inspires me. So when I thought about the blues and what it was for their time, that was the way to be able to speak like the sorrow, what was going on, or just to show emotion. So that's why I made like the images within a blue tent, and I'm going to share like a few of them here, like just in a second. And then I went out and I actually was able to like present everything, and then the collection ended up becoming a permanent collection for the Black Archives of South Florida. So like that was a blessing, and I'm very fortunate to be able to add like to the narrative that Ms. Fields shares, and with the current narrative of our time, because I think it's very important to not only look back on the history, but continue to capture like what's going on currently. Because if it wasn't for happenstance, I would have not known about a Black archive, you know, and been able to like contribute to it.
You mentioned Gordon Parks, and anyone on the panel definitely please chime in. And again, I'm hearing this echoing over and over again. Dr. Fields came and mentioned the journalist that decided to save that footage. And I was watching a TV show that was talking about a radio station who back then they did not record their program. So anything that happened affects it. Gordon Parks documented a lot of Black history through the camera, through the lens. And this is something that you came out and did as well. And so, and you talked about how that led to charge. And we would definitely want to see a lot of some of the footage that you have. The No More Blues exhibit is just that, it documented. So please talk us through what you have to share for us.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to take a second here, like just to share my screen. So like this was in 2000. Is everything on? Okay, cool. So it's here. Let me close this here. Okay, so like these are like the images like that I took in 2014 during like the civil peaceful like unrest, like when it came to like all of like the killings of the time, and like this protest took place during Art Basel in 2014. Art Basel is an international art festival that's based down here in South Florida, and they had people from all over like the country. However, like we, like as the organizers or just the organizers of the protest, just want to let people know like that it was just not a vacation going on with all of the things that were happening to Black and brown people across the country. So like these are just like a few of the images like that we were able to take, that I was able to capture during like the protest. And as you can see, like here, like we were able to actually walk on 95 and actually block off like the traffic to make things inconvenient for people so they can actually hear us during this, you know, like this beautiful art festival that all these people come across from everywhere across the world. Like we felt like it was an obligation. Yes, sir.
I just want to express again for everybody that is watching, this is 2000 what?
14.
2000. This is not 2020.
14.
This is 2014 this happened, and we're seeing this history happen all over again. I just want to express that people see the difference, and most importantly, this was right after the Mike Brown incident.
Correct.
Okay, continue.
Correct. Yes, this was right after like the Mike Brown incident. And I think like Eric Gardner might have been like a couple weeks prior to that, or like something like that. So like all these images here, like as I was shooting like the like the images, I did not want them to be pretty because I wanted people to be able to feel something like that was coming across like from these people, and I wanted like the images to convey all of the emotions that I felt at the time going through it as a person of you know like as a millennial that's going through the same thing that all of the previous generations has, and like being able to like share that. So like these are just like, and of course like we had posters like just of all of like different names, just as it is now in these times. So like these are, and like this is like right through Wynwood, which is an area like that has been like gentrified. Like it used to be close to our area as far as like Overtown, and like a lot of like the messaging, like with the signs and you know, and just the raw emotions like from everyone. Like I wanted to be able to capture that and be able to put it on display for generations to see. And I'll be totally honest with you, like another thing that really caught me, I was like, look, no one's gonna talk bad about my generation and say that we didn't put the work in as well. So I wanted to get on the ground in order to show that we were out there risking it as well. And also to show like all of those that have come before us that we're out there doing it. And like another point that I want to also highlight, and I love like this image here because of like what it says here, like with this sign, like when a injustice becomes law, resistance becomes a duty. And you know, like now in 2020, as we can see, like injustices are becoming law at the highest levels of government and things of that sort. And whenever I was like shooting like this imagery, and this was like a die-in, so basically everyone went silent for the amount of time that Mike Brown laid on the ground, and when he died. So we did it like for like I forget like what was like the time range or whatever. But this image here speaks to like this is one of the images that really speaks to me, because when I started to do my research, as I would talk about this exhibition like around the country, I realized that I was seeing some of the same signs, same images, even on the sides of the Black Lives Matter or like the civil rights era. There were Black and white people holding signs. There was cops on the other side, and there was still like the, you know, like the racist folks on the other side. However, all these individuals have either moved on, got old, passed, retired, or anything, but we're in the same like situation. So this sign here really speaks to me, because I always tell people whenever I speak about this show to not indict individuals, because that's not going to change. We need to indict the system, and that's one of my main messages here. And this image here is quite one of like the most iconic images like that I have, like with the whole collection. And I think it just shows just how bold love can be and freedom can be, because like this is a highway, and like, you know, like we were disturbing like the peace while being peaceful. But like these are things that I think are necessary in order for us to be able to capture like the attention of those like that have the power to like truly make change. So like those were just like a few of the images. And I had like I remember like Ben Crumb, like, which is one of my fraternity brothers, like he said, like there's only two things like that can change politicians. It's either money or people. And unfortunately, like we don't have all the money just now, but I think all the people going out and being able to like share their voices and being able to get out there and make their voices heard, like through protesting. And I take it upon myself to be able to like document like these type of things and to tell our story. So that's just like a basic like rundown of my experience as it comes to like this modern age of capturing like the historical relevance of what's going on now.
So, and
I applaud you. I applaud you for that. Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Thank you.
So we're just for our readers, we have questions that are being populated in the Q&A. Just for our viewers, we're setting the stage, and we're going to go back to our archival professionals toward the end of the discussion. We're just showing ways that information has been documented throughout this process, and then we're going to get to best practices very soon. I want to go back to Lou Kramer. She has some video footage that's amazing that we wanted her to share, and understand that as much as photography, video is a part of documenting history. Lou, are you with us? Are you able to?
Let's try it again.
Okay. Because I know we had some viewers that were wanted to see it. Here we go. The Carver. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you want to set the stage for some of this footage here?
I doubt very seriously.
Wow.
We'll let Dr. King talk.
Well, I would say the vast majority of these counties, you wouldn't have any strong resistance. I think the chief problem would be to conquer apathy. I don't think any section of the country can boast of clean hands in this whole area of human rights. But at the same time, the South should not use the mistakes of Brooklyn or Chicago or Levittown, Pennsylvania as an excuse for its own mistakes.
So that's just an example of, it's a compilation of news film about Dr. King's visits, and it's like a civil rights compilation that we have. So we've pulled things together over the years based on requests. So when we have, someone saying, oh, I want to see all the footage of Dr. King's speeches in Miami, and we're talking years ago. The archive started in 1984. So essentially we've been dealing with our footage since then. Now we're digitizing everything, so it's a little more accessible. And I think that's the key point for our collection, is to make sure it is accessible and that it continues to be accessible. There's another video that, let me set this up too. Let me see if I can share my screen again. This one it includes some of the lunch counter sit-ins organized by Dr. John Brown. And in it, there is footage of pickets in a neighborhood. And you'll see where, Sandino was talking about the rawness of some of the signs, and you'll see it in the footage here. Let me go forward.
We want to work them out with the officials and see.
Dr. Brown.
So this is Dr. John Brown.
Implementing the decisions of the Supreme Court. Dynamite have been
Let me go forward a little bit. So here, a family has moved in a black family has moved into a white neighborhood.
Wow.
And these are the kinds of pickets that these women were carrying, marching in front of his house.
And this is Miami. This isn't Alabama.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the time, Miami was very much the South.
Miami is still the South. Wow.
So it's very, these are very strong images, and it has an emotional reaction, and it's very strong. And then, this was compiled for research. Now we have some of the lunch counter sit-ins
accomplished by this demonstration.
with Dr. John Brown.
To eliminate racial discrimination in all public accommodations here in the city of Miami.
So you have this happening in different places downtown. It happened at McCrory's as well, but the fact that we have these images, and you have some people who are just don't want to be on camera.
Do you plan to go beyond the demonstration which you have here to other places? Yes, we certainly do. We intend to carry it into all areas where there is racial discrimination.
So there's a lot of that kind of material, and you can actually search our online catalog. You can also search our YouTube channel. We've got a lot of videos that are curated, that our public program coordinator, Kevin, puts together and posts on Facebook and everything. Instagram, Facebook, I think we have Twitter as well. I'm not, the social media side of things is a little.
So are you currently documenting any of this images, or is everything just historical? Do you still bring it?
It's historical. We had this discussion very early on, just a brief discussion saying, because someone had asked us if we were collecting all this news footage. And for us, there are certain copyright limitations and intellectual property issues that would preclude us from collecting material and making it accessible. So we hope that at some point stations will, again, will get a donation from the local Miami stations, and it will contain all this material. But we're not actively recording anything. And we've noticed with a lot of the digital footage that's out there, a lot of the stations are creating these little areas on their websites, documenting all the different, what's happening from the pandemic to the social unrest and all the protests and the, police violence and everything. So I think digital has made it easier for the stations to kind of do their own curation of their collections and put them on their websites. How long it stays up, that's another question.
Okay, amazing. As we segue, definitely trying to move, looking at time as well. Just want to acknowledge Dr. Phil's Pat Brandon is watching on Instagram, and she said that her grandmother was a washerwoman, Genevieve Ward
Franks.
Yeah, so when you mentioned the washerwomen who washed those hoods, she was letting you know that her grandmother was probably one of the ones washing the hood.
One quick thing, I just wanted to ask Lou, if you don't mind, can you type the link to your online archives in the chat? So if anybody, to everyone, so that if anyone wants to visit your online archives and look, they can know where to find it.
Mary, come, you want to get on?
Uh-oh. Definitely, that's your grandbaby, I'm quite sure, right, Doc?
Yes.
So we want to introduce at this time, as we watch time, I wanted to introduce this individual. I thought it was very important that he take part in this. I could talk about him a little bit because he's my friend. Amazing individual, heavily involved in the community, but he is leading a institution that came out of Jim Crow and is a voice to that. For many people that like to say racism didn't exist in Miami, and we've heard that before. We heard people say that happened. Even with the story that Dr. Fields talked about, many people were like, oh, that did not happen in Miami. So at this time, I definitely want to introduce and bring, definitely Mr. Terrence Cribbs LaRun. Hello, Terrence.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hi, Doc.
Hi, how are you?
I love you.
Good to see you.
It's great to see you. Great to be on a panel with you. Wow, this is history for me. It's great. So I am the Tim. I want to thank you as well as my sister and Sarah, Camille. Thank you very much, Camilla. I love you guys for putting this together. For those, and I just have to toot some horns because it's necessary that I do this because I don't think any of us would be having these conversations if it wasn't for the efforts of Dr. Fields. This institution that I sit in would not be in its place if it wasn't for the efforts and the movement of Dr. Fields and those retired police officers. So I'm humbled to be here as the museum director for the City of Miami Black Police Precinct Courthouse Museum. We are essentially pioneers in the conversation as it relates to integration of Blacks within the police force, law enforcement. Prior to us, there were no Blacks within in the Miami-Dade County that were serving in law enforcement. And so there was a strong fight through community efforts to make that happen, community activism. So I would say that in lending to what we're talking about as far as what the push to make this happen and the agency to make this happen came out of a movement. Back in the 1940s, when the 1944, when the actual first 5 came on board. Prior to that, there were a number of incidents that were occurring in the South that Blacks were not receiving agency. They weren't making it, and you're going to hear some similarities. They weren't making it to the courthouse. They weren't making it to the jailhouse. You're going to see some similarities, right? They weren't making it to those points. And prior to then, there were a number of white officers still did not see Blacks as human beings. We have to maintain that understanding. Marcus Garvey makes me remember, history so well, because he says a people without their history and their origin and their culture is like a tree without roots. And so that always brings me to the forefront of why history and remembering what history tells us and preserving history helps us to do for the future. And so out of the struggles came a edifice or another institution, which is this Black police precinct, this actual courthouse, jail, as well as a booking station. So I am a person that comes out of community activism. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, so I know we've had some conversation about Ferguson. I'm a Jennings guy. So I was a part of a DSEG program, which means I was bused all the way to about an hour and a half outside of my own community to attend an all-white school to sit as a token Black child. I'm not that old, but that's how devastating, I guess, the community of St. Louis was and still is at this time. But much of my responsibility to understanding history really came out of watching my grandmother write the names in Bibles and all of the baptisms of our family members be written in the Bibles and in the hymn books of our churches. And that kind of started this cultivating interest around documenting and history. And that brought in, I guess, another understanding of why it was also important for us to know who were the name or who were the pictures or the faces on these pictures that we have. And so I tell our audience that is listening, you don't have to be a museum, even though I love museums. I think museums are great. Your house is a museum. I'm asking every family member to turn those pictures over and go back to the old days when you used to put the names on the back of the pictures, or those kindergarten pictures, and you put their age and put the real name, please. Put the real name on the back of the picture, not just the nickname. We like the nickname, but putting the real name. And I'm using that as an example to get into what are we doing to preserve this time, this moment. Because as you go out into these protests and what I like to call revolutionary movements, as you capture them with your phones, most of you all are capturing them with your phones, the struggle is real when it comes to how much data your phone can contain before you start deleting them. And many of you all will delete them because you want space for your next app. You want space for your next set of pictures. And so it's really a timely purpose for us to have this conversation to help our audience to know sending these photos through your email and saving them on your email, saving them in your Google Drive is essential. And that's what needed to happen here at the precinct too, because we knew, or we know now, that a lot of our officers never saved anything. They didn't have the mind to save. They didn't realize that they were the first or the pioneers in that space. They knew no one came before them, but they didn't really understand the significance of what they were standing in and being an agency of. And I think the same can be said to many of our young people who are marching in these streets. I think if I look at those pictures from 2014, and I ask, wow, I wonder if I interview some of those same persons that are in those pictures, I wonder what the relationship between 2014 to 2020 now is. How much of their mindset has changed? Do they believe the system has been in any way adjusted to what they had done? And that's why we see this repetitive, right? Tim kind of alluded to the repetitive that we see in the signage, as well as the pictures, the framing of how the conversation is. And that's partly because the narrative has always been given to someone else to say. And so I would like to say from our space, for those who don't know about South Florida, you heard when the looting starts, the shooting starts. We know that was Chief Headley, and Chief Headley is actually a reason why this building exists. He's part of the reason, because it couldn't come about in 1944. But as soon as he became chief, those same community leaders pressed him heavily to make sure that this become a precinct so that Blacks could actually make it to judgment, can actually make it to court. So those are just some things I like to toss out there. I would like to also put out there one of the first pivotal moments in my life when I realized how important it was to stamp the moment of history was when I went to the De Silva Museum and African American history in Chicago. So because I was in St. Louis, we would travel quite often to Chicago, and I would go to that museum, and Dr. Margaret Burroughs was there at the time that I actually had an opportunity to go. And today I actually, for whatever reason, I decided to post a picture that I had gotten from that time there. But I mentioned that museum because that museum actually was birthed out of the 1960s, and a lot of the movements, and that was very common. A lot of the activism and the movements, they wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that history. So I believe there's a Black Lives Movement museum happening. We already know that the Smithsonian has already commissioned a lot of curators to go out and collect the posters and and a lot of the demonstration pamphlets. And so they're coming up with shows around that. And so we can do that here in South Florida as well. You can collect everything. I mean, everything from sound bites, everything from songs that you sing, all of that should be preserved and then hand over to the Black Archives, where they have much more space than we do here at the Black Police Courthouse Museum. But from a police perspective, I will say I'm very honored and proud of our Black police officers who are literally standing in the face of danger, both within the being blue and within being Black, right? And these Black police officers are speaking out against the injustice that they experience being in those uniforms. And so we're collecting that. I've made a vow to every article that hits the Miami Herald, New Times. I love to give a shout out to the one and only best newspaper in the entire South Florida is the Miami Times. You can't get any better than that. I say that because we would not know our story if it wasn't for the family of the Reeves. We would not know what we know because we know other papers were not telling our story. So I salute my brother who is capturing these pictures because we know others are not going to capture those pictures in that same frame, right? So that's what you can do. That's it. I think that's my good 15. I said I was going to do only 15. That's my good 15.
So we're pushing forward, watching the time. Again, thank you. This has been a great discussion and how we've been going about it. Thanks for all the panelists. I at this point would love to, we've heard from the history, we heard from the history makers, the keepers of history, and I want our audience to know that we're going to answer the questions toward the end with the Q&A and go back to best practices very soon. But we first have to tell this story from the people that are actually involved in doing this right now. And I want to turn now to Ms. Shadia Nelson, and I who works with Urgent Inc. She's going to tell you more about herself. And this could not be a segment without talking about the people that are working with our children. Dr. Fields always say, what do we tell our children? So we want to definitely bring in Shadia to talk about how the children are interpreting this moment and how it's being captured through expression. So Ms. Nelson, how are you?
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be a part of this amazing historic opportunity with this amazing panel. So thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Shadia Nelson. I'm the artistic director and the programs manager with Urgent Inc. Urgent Inc. is a youth and community development organization dedicated to empowering young minds to transform their communities. One of the ways we do that is helping to cultivate young, talented, amazing filmmakers and activating young entrepreneurs. We offer after-school programming, summer camp, and summer youth internship opportunities with the young people. When we are having these conversations from the spectrum of the ages that we're working with, from K to high school, and it all varies. So when we're talking to our Yes campers over the summer, as they're very aware of what's going on. From the kindergartens, very clear that they're very aware. And so we cultivate these conversations around self-esteem and how they're seeing themselves. We have a great existing partnership with University of Miami where they're providing their Kalula curriculum on cultural competency and how do we celebrate our ancestry, our family stories and our histories and celebrating who we are. So we talk about colorism and we find that our young people from K to 5 are celebrating who they are. So when they're having to choose a spectrum of skin color, say with a doll, they're choosing one that looks more like them. And celebrating, yes, this one is beautiful, this one is smart, this is amazing. We use the arts between film, photography, visual arts, and Teen Talk Radio to help cultivate these narratives from their perspective. It's important that the young people are telling their stories from their perspective and how we're documenting that. So this summer we're dedicated, our young people, they're providing film content, Teen Talk Radio, which will be hosted at our 6th annual Youth Economic Development Conference coming up July 23rd to the 25th. Definitely want to join us virtually. You can check it out at our website. I'll put it in the chat to register and learn more information about that opportunity. With our Teen Talk Radio, it's co-moderated by Jill Tracy and our talented middle schoolers. When we got into hot topic conversation, you have to tune in. This is it ranges from the Black Lives movement, from the protest, what their role is, and education. And what is that looking like from them, from their perspective, and how they're getting a lot of the content from TikTok. And there's a lot to be talked about from their perspective and how they're ingesting this conversation. The other part I wanted to implement that our FACE camp, FACE standing for Film, Art, Culture, Coding, Entrepreneurship, which where we work with 2nd to 5th graders, boys and girls. We're animating stories. So they're creating their own videos. Now, when we ask them, what do you want to talk about? What's the theme? They chose racism. And so they developed this narrative called, so the piece is called Stress Bomb. So a bomb drops, racism. So people are catching racism like COVID-19. Wow. You have to check out. So we're premiering that film next week at our end of camp show on July 21st. So you, from the mouths of young people, you definitely have to tune in of how they're developing these narratives. And then through photography with our Rites of Passage Media Arts Camp, they're also part of our Teen Talk Radio and they're creating beautiful photography. So how are we celebrating and not only documenting this experience, but also celebrating and recognizing their natural talents and strengths. We want that to also be a part of the narrative of these are amazing Black and brown young people producing high quality content, maybe not even realizing they had the talent with them, they just had to pull it out. So I wanted to share 2 quick pieces. One, I'm also a published author and a poet, and I performed a piece, Lyric Live on IG. If it's okay if I can share that one real quick?
Yes, no problem.
This disease is filling my lungs, injected into veins, splitting my brain, playing tricks on my mind, creating hallucinations and delusions of a superiority complex, power and control of mind and body reflexes, causing aggressive behavior, extreme fear of losing control, panic, terrified thoughts, impaired judgment and cognition, abuse, misuse, addiction, and even death. You can't catch this from coughing or having a fever or staying 6 feet away. Sanitizer won't help kill this disease. Can you see it? Since it was conceived at the hands of hate, I've been trying to stop killing. I wish I could take it back. Every bullet in every unarmed Black person, every hand and around every neck, every knee pushed in the back of every neck, every assault, every lash whipped across backs, every time the N-word is flung across the air, smeared in blood, shattering, trembling flesh, every dissected part of Sarah Bartman, AKA Top Business. Every strange fruit hung from trees, every mouth trying to breathe, every chalk outlining, every time a Black person was spit on, every for colored only sign, every denied point of entry to school, every time Black people had to sit in the back, every bloody Sunday or bloody election day, every water hose, dogs, clubs, and tear gas thrown, every hate-filled thought passed on to generations, every bullet pressed against the side of the head, every routine traffic stop turned violent, every time Black entertainers had to walk through the kitchen, every segregated hotel and establishment, every false police report, every denied mortgage loan, every time voters are suppressed, every innocent Black person on death row. Can you see it? I am disrupting immune systems. I am opening these hateful and confused hands as a weapon. This hand laced in metal is not me. This is an STD, a socially transmitted disease at my throat called racism, a historic intergenerational traumatic disease, a public health crisis, a genocidal pandemic. Sound the sirens. This is a 400-year-old state of public health emergency, choking on injustice, injecting ideas of scientific deficiencies, justifying reasons to place an inferiority complex, transferring across generations, stolen stem cells, injecting lives like Tuskegee experiments, dissecting Black bodies used to justify scientific racism, exchanging cells and bodies to bodies behind jail cells, masked with fear, trying to put masks on the sickness. Can you stop it? Bleeding on concrete, infiltrating the hood with high concentrated doses of fear, dropping Black and brown bodies. This disease cannot be stopped by wearing a mask, wearing a hoodie, being unarmed, holding your hands up, driving, walking down the street, selling CDs, jogging down the street, sleeping at home, playing video games at home, sitting on your mom's porch, wearing locks or any natural hairstyle. This disease fueled killings of more than 260,000 Black men in America since 1980. Filling more jail cells. Can you stop it? I can't breathe. I can't breathe in all the hatred. So I'm about to go running for Ahmaud Arbery and Walter Scott, about to play games and for Tatiana Jefferson, about to walk down the street for Trayvon Martin, sit in my car for Sandra Bland, sit on the porch for DeJuan Yorce, put on my seatbelt for Freddie Gray, hold my hands up for Michael Brown, sell music for Alton Sterling, walk across the street for Devontae Shipman, walk home for Gregory Gunn and Lamar Smith. I breathe for Eric Gardner and George Floyd. I stand for Breonna Taylor, Sean Bell, Kendra James, Ezell Ford, Laquan McDonald, Tamir Rice, Jamar Clark, Sharice Francis, Ramarley Graham, LaTanya Haggerty, Ronald Madison, Manuel Loggins Jr., Rashard Brooks, Elijah McCain, Malcolm Harsh, Robert Fuller, Althea Bernstein, Rodney King, Fred Hammond, Mark Clark, Emmett Till, and for every Black person who has been unjustly harassed and killed. I'm going to stand in and speak truth and be Black and love my Nubian locks while holding on to my pride for Andrew Johnson and for all the beautiful Black girls suspended for rocking their natural hair. To all the South African girls who protested with the 25,000 people on a petition to lift suspension on Black hair. For the South African school who put together a hair committee. A hair committee was created out of fear of an empowered Black girl who refused to change her Blackness. For a 12-year-old Black girl in Texas bullied at school by students, then bullied by the school to suspend her Black hair. So you tell me who's really the bully. And for trying to suspend natural Black hair in the Bahamas. Hashtag support the puff. Let me not put on my oppression to help you feel relaxed with permed hair. Can you see it? Brown versus Board, Hair Committee versus policing Black hair, Law and Order versus equitable justice, Jim Crow versus mass incarceration of Black people. This socially transmitted disease is at my throat. Can you stop it? Racism. Can you see it? So don't spit on my culture with a Kool-Aid smile and then try to touch my hair. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If I may add one other, I just want to add one little teaser from our Teen Talk. Now, this is produced by our FACE interns. These are all high school young people. They wrote, produced, and coordinated this whole piece. This is tight. Can I just share it real quick?
Okay.
You're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to know. Life is a mystery. If you take away the mystery and everything was certain, you would need faith.
Hello, America. I know you hear me. Or will you continue to turn a blind eye on the pain of your people? Will you continue to push to stabilize the economy despite death rates? You have proved time and time again that people can't place their trust, their lives in the system, in their country, and definitely not in man. But what am I saying? My trust was never in you anyway. It was always in God, and there it will remain.
That's how sick America is. Our education is being stopped because of this pandemic, because of this corona, this pandemic. Stop our education so our kids won't learn. Keeping us inside our homes so we can't socially express ourselves. You know, some people may like that. Some people don't. America, I know you guys got the vaccines. Just give it to us.
Hello, America? Are you out of your mind? You're telling people to drink bleach to get rid of this virus? You must think I'm crazy. You're letting people keep their stores open even though it's not safe? I may not be the leader, but I sure would make a better one.
America, don't hang up. It's time that I speak up for my people. It's time that I open my mouth and say it's enough and we're tired. I just can't seem to comprehend the problem with our skin color. I want to know what you see when you look at us. I want to know how you come to the conclusion that we deserve to die. Why don't you give us a chance to introduce ourselves? The only difference between us is our skin color. We're humans just like you. We deserve chances. All lives matter. Black lives matter.
Hello, America? Can you hear me? Can you hear my suffering? Can you hear my pain? I called to let you know something. I called to let you know that I'm tired of my black brothers and sisters dying. I'm tired of them crying. I'm tired of all this pain. Every time when I walk down the street, I gotta look both ways so the white man won't kill me. I always gotta look behind my back. People of America, I got many things to say in many different ways. I am tired, man. You didn't care about us then. You sure dang well don't care about us now. I can't take this. You're gonna kill us by every given day. You killed us yesterday. You killed us today. You will kill us tomorrow. I cannot take this anymore. This is pain I can no longer endure. Come on, America. Pick up the phone.
Wow.
They pulling me over. I'm showing them both of my hands and watching my words.
Thank you so much.
No, you gotta wait. You gotta listen to the end.
Let's get real serious right now.
It's powerful.
You don't care about me. You don't care about your kids. You don't care about their mental health. You don't care if we sad, we worried, we stressed, we fatigued. You don't care about none of that. I'm sad, I'm confused, I'm angry. Then I realized my country only cares about money.
I find it a tad bit crazy how you're the land of the free. I mean, the land of opportunity, but you can't see. We're not just hurting physically, but mentally. Depression, panic attacks, anxiety, and fear. Every thought is a battle. Every breath is a war. My body is living, but my mind is dying.
People are dying at the hands of police every day. People are dying at the hands of COVID every day. And the people who have it the worst in this country are dying by their own hands. May they rest easy, because those who still stand today will not rest until there is change. Because you, America, are the criminal. You are the thug. You are... They hung up.
Can we, if you mean, Shada, we don't want to, we're going into the second hour. If you can post a link in the chat so people can connect to that, it is powerful. I do want to address some of these questions because I want to take part in everyone's time and want to get this Q&A before everybody, we lose everybody on the panel as well as the audience. So thank you so much for that input. I'm gonna go to the question. I'm gonna call on our Louis Burton, our assistant archivist. Possibly we're gonna start with, are you with us, Louis? I'm looking at one of the questions in the Q&A by Zamina Valdivia. I hope I'm not murdering that name. Focus on archival description. Do you have recommendations to explore issues of common use of marginalizing language in descriptive practices? Or anyone from the panel?
That's a really good question. That's definitely one of the things that I see as going to be changing with archives in the future. The use of language, and I actually did some quick research. So this is from the Glossary of Archival and Records Terminology. This is just posted by the SAA. I don't know quite how old it is, but in there it says, a significant temptation that lexicographers face is the desire to normalize language, to make it more rational. In its most innocent form, that temptation is a compulsion to tidy up those areas of ambiguity around the details of meaning, to correct the exception by making some irregularity in the language fit the mold. A darker side of normalization is for the lexicographer to intentionally interject bias into the work by preferring one definition over another, often in deference to a personal point of view. So when you are archiving, you need to be aware of your own bias. You have to be aware of yourself, your place versus the documents that you're doing in the community that you're working for. You have to check yourself on those things. And for a lack of a better word, I think I'm kind of woke. So I try to situate myself in a way that does not interject any sort of personal bias or anything that would do harm to the documents or to the history that I'm trying to preserve. And that's another question that I think was really interesting from earlier, is like, what is the archivist perspective? What is our role? And it's not to interpret history. And that's kind of what that, in a very long-winded way, that's what that definition was trying to say. It's not your point. It's not your place to interpret history, but just to preserve it. And you have to do that with the best terminology that you can. And I know that language is something that is changing all the time. And I know, for example, with people who are maybe non-binary or have multiple genders, that's something that you have to do your research on and maybe reach out to someone who knows that language. Like I, for one, I don't know all the 52 different genders, but I can reach out and I can try to understand and do my best to make sure that that document that I'm working on gets the best labeling so that people in the future can find this. It is worth doing the work. It's important to do the work. I hope that answers the question. That's the best I got.
Anyone else want to chime in on that particular question about archival description posed by Zamina? Are there any examples of way that some of the collections or language and art practice description could be marginalized?
For us, well, no, go ahead. Go ahead, my love. I just know for us, one of the things that we are very specific about is to ensure that if the N word is used, we will try to do our best to label it a number of ways so that if you're using it as a term N word or you actually looking up the actual word nigger, that you can find it. and it can be described or can be kept. Also, we know that dialect. So here in Miami, a lot of Bohemian settlements. And so there's a lot of ways that things were said, similar to the Bible, how we translate the Bible, not to disrupt the dialect from that, because that takes away from the feeling and the meaning that was brought in. And that only helps when you're talking about written versus written versus oral for us.
And I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if also in choosing to use the word riot versus protest versus unrest, maybe that was something else that Jimena may have been asking about. But like when we document these things, how important is it whether it is labeled, the I-95 riot versus a protest, or, a civil unrest in response to the murder of George Floyd versus thugs rioting on the street. So perhaps that's also part of the kind of marginalized language that can be used, so that when the people like us who are here, or the archivist, Jocelyn is not there to explain and give more context, that word riot and what that means versus protest. Riot is kind of people out there burn down stuff, causing all this disruption. Protest, what were they protesting? What is it in response to? Protest indicates there's a cause and effect type of situation, which lends to more telling of the story, because there's a protest. Well, what were they protesting? Versus a riot.
With our historical collection, the news film from WTVJ came with a set of index cards that were produced at the station during the time the films were shot. So a lot of the language is the vernacular of that time. We felt it was important to preserve that information, those kinds of descriptions in our cataloging, because that was the original description. And again, as archivists, we don't want to editorialize, and we don't want to change the language, because then that kind of changes the original nature of the materials. Even though the images are there and they're sort of persistent, it's important to retain the cultural, societal viewpoint that was going on at that time too. So, you can flip through our catalog and there will be references to, referring to Negroes, referring to colored people within the cataloging. And we've chosen to retain that just to maintain the original, document, essentially.
Yes, I was gonna say that the Black Archives, when a donor donates a collection, we don't infer, our own opinions, and we really try to preserve the contents of that collection. So, if a certain donor has a label certain ways, using old vernacular, then we'll keep it that way. And then, of course, when the researchers come and they're asking for certain materials, we make recommendation, but you also have to inform them, because at the time, due to that era, certain language that was used to marginalized community was common use, and we just help educate people. And we do nowadays sort of protest, riots, it's protest. So we expect as materials being created now, that you're going to see that shift, that change, as more modern day collections are being archived.
Okay, great. So, and one thing, if I can kind of interject and just share and understand, I guess from an archive standpoint, is one, preserving today's history, but it's more importantly, what is that same history going to say tomorrow, and how it will be interpreted. I like when Camila brought up that fact, the description of labeling as thugs and things of that nature. Will that same language carry over 20 years from now? So how would we view these riots or protests from today next year? How do we view the ones from 60 years ago, 30 years ago, you know? So that's very important. Thank you. I want to go on, and there's another question. We want to make sure we address everyone that has participated. We thank everyone that's hanging in on this, has went a little bit longer than we anticipated. I have a question from Gail Willingham that asks, is the trend in history circular? Why are people identifying by race or other physical characteristics and then trying to be diverse, only to want a separate group again? And that's a question posed by Gail Willingham. Anyone on that would like to chime in on that?
Maybe Marcus Williams from Urgent Inc. He's our ambassador. Maybe you can speak to that.
You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, I think I could chime in. So, hi everyone. So my name is Marcus Williams. I'm an ambassador for Urgent Inc. and I'm also a college student, a second-year student at Florida State University. I've been through numerous institutes and learning modules about the importance of diversity, inclusion, and the importance of identity. And I think that when in this time we're learning the importance of intersectionality, and so that's realizing the intersections within our identities, realizing that we are privileged in some instances. For instance, males are privileged, even though people do not have, people are like, what? Even a black male is privileged, even though a black male is oppressed in the society because of the color of his skin, he does have an upper hand because of him being the male. So I think that those physical characteristics and realizing the fact that we are diverse is important. I think that in certain instances, people who are white like to tend to identify with certain other characteristics to make them be diverse and to set the image of them being oppressed, which that's not the whole, that's not the importance of identifying diversity and intersectionality. It's important about realizing our culture and realizing the fact that we bring something that is unique to the table. We bring a unique voice to the table. And that has been long erased within history. So I think that the importance of identifying who we are is accepting and affirming who we are and taking pride in that, because we never know the effect that could have on people.
And taking a step from that, taking pride means also in the spirit of diversity. So for example, you're looking at the Overtown community. When you do get to the position where now you're not just relegated to one area or one community, and there is diversity, understanding that now that you have access to those other spaces does not mean you leave your space behind. So I think that that's part of kind of maybe where the question was also coming from, is that, you know, we want to have these spaces of inclusion and things like that, but also we realize that there are some aspects of our life that are best experienced when we are in a communal setting, when we are, you know, around our people. And although we want to be allowed and included in other sections, we have thrived as communities when a lot of doors were closed to us because we didn't have anywhere else to support and show our resources. So saying that is saying that now that you do have that access, still don't forget that it is important to support Black businesses and support the Black community, even though we have access to those other spaces. The dollar that we spend at Macy's is not going to impact your community the same way the dollar that you would spend at the Black-owned store that's in a Black neighborhood.
Our last question, and we're going to begin to wrap this up, comes from Alyssa Sorkin. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. When might we create something like a civil rights or African American museum for Miami? Should I be answering that?
Yes.
Virginia Key Beach is working on creating a civil rights museum. That has been in the works for some years now. I think they're very close at this point to making that come to fruition. If you're not aware, I think someone spoke earlier about Virginia Key Beach being the colored beach that was designated as a black beach for people of color during Jim Crow because the white people did not want black people to swim in their beaches as a result of a wade-in that was done. There was some talks about a black museum being built next to the Perez and and Museum Park, I should say. That was a resolution proffered by Commissioner Dennis Moss, who, when they were on the verge of voting for a Cuban museum, he made sure that they add in that there will be a black museum built if they're going to build a Cuban museum that's for civil rights. Beyond that, you do have a lot of black institutions. Although we don't have a formal civil rights museum at this time, you have the Black Police Precinct, you have the Black Archives, you have the Hampton House, you have other locations throughout Miami that has been collecting and documenting this history for some time now. The only thing they've been waiting for is you. So if you have an opportunity, please, during this time that people are now being black, and it's cool to be black now, take the opportunity once we get through this COVID-19 situation to support your local black institutions. We have FAPAN, which is the Florida Heritage Preservation Network. We have AAAM, which is the Association of African American Museums. You have across this country many black institutions that were started by people like Dr. Dorothy Jenkins Fields, who felt that it was very important to document the history of blacks in their area. So I can say we because I'm a part of, we've been waiting for your support. Terrence been waiting for your support. Sandino, with his capturing cameras, he's been waiting to hear from people in their support. So this exists. So I just want to say to everyone, the time has passed us. Thank you, Marcus, for coming on as an ambassador for Urgent Inc. I want to thank Dr. Fields, who I think we lost. Dr. Fields always had this thing, the meeting should not last longer than 2 hours. So we've been here. I thank everybody. I thank you, Lou Kramer, for coming on and sharing with us this opportunity. I want to thank everyone that has watched and stayed with us since 6:30 and being a part of this discussion. We want to do this again. We want to attempt to do this. I want to thank my staff for bringing their expertise to the table. Everyone didn't get to speak, but we want to do this again. We want to talk about this again. We want to talk about the scholarship behind collecting and archiving and interpreting and making it available. We also want to talk about the social aspects of what we do, and that's what we didn't get into, the social aspect. How does this affect our daily life, being the holders of these things, being the person that I know Lou Kramer put up a very talk-worthy piece where they were protesting out in front of someone's home, a black person, just for purchasing a house in a white neighborhood. How does this affect our mental seeing this and have to document this history and make it available? That's a whole nother conversation. So we want to thank everybody for coming on. We just appreciate everybody that has been a part of this. I don't know if anybody have a closing statement from Lou Kramer, Terrence, Sandino.
Thank you for the opportunity, for sure. Thanks for bringing us all together.
Yeah.
And also, Mr. Barber, you did mention that, after this COVID, everybody can support us. I would like to let people know that you do not have to wait until after COVID to support us. All of our institutions, from Urgent Inc. to the Black Police Precinct, the Black Archives, and I'm sure even Sandino will happily take your love offerings right now. Now is actually when we need it to help us to continue to do the work that we're doing, for Shedia to continue to do what she's doing with the kids. Book Sandino, I'm sure he could find a way to socially distance, shoot you, send something over to Terrence, because what we're doing it's really not for us right now. It is for the future. It's so that when we're not gone, when we're not here to back up the story, this information will be here for the future, and it's very important. So that's all I wanted to say, is just any opportunity that you can to support, I invite you to do so.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I was going to encourage everybody to save their photos. Don't delete them. text messages, archival material comes in all different types of format. And, if you're looking for an institution to donate, there are so many great ones, including the Black Archives, the Black Precinct. And, the important thing is for this information to get preserved.
Yeah, and we have this small group, it's the South Florida Archives Collective, and we're doing a Archives Day in October. And the theme is open to ideas, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access in the archives. So that's something that, if you're interested in collecting materials, or if you have an interest in archives and how we deal with what's happening now with the, in our society with the protests and everything happening, this might be an opportunity to exchange ideas and find out what archives are doing and how we're addressing, making things accessible during this time.
So Tim, it would be remiss if I did not say, we are entering to our 70th anniversary. I know our brother and sister at the Virginia Key Beach is 75 years celebrating. And so you can support these institutions. I also like to say, if you want, buying Black art is never out of style. As a matter of fact, we're honored to have Shadia Nelson is the sister of Kadir Nelson, who is a fabulous artist that you've seen on the New Yorker as well as Rolling Stone. And so those are how we're documenting. Artists are actually getting out there and painting these amazing pieces that you should collect. So that's another way to actually put that into your space.
Awesome.
I think, Marcus, you wanted to share something as you're being impacted right here as a college student. Since Florida is a Confederate state, there are some Confederate statues that are on the college campus.
Yeah, I just want to say that I applaud you all because I know, Camilla, I remember from my summer internship with Urgent Ink, and everything started to click in my head when I go into certain spaces and go into museums and see these names that are notable. And currently right now we're fighting Florida State University for keeping an enslaver statue on our campus who is profound in Tallahassee history and things like that. And so I think I applaud you because what you document will help us fight the good fight. So thank you all.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, with that being said, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our participants. I don't know if there's anyone else. Thank you, Jamie Rogers, for letting us know if there's any.
Save the Zoom.
Thank you, Zoom. Yes. So thank you, everyone. We're going to be doing this again very soon. So stay tuned, stay plugged in. Thank you, Sadinos. Thank you to Devon Shadia, Lou Kramer, Louis Burton, Jocelyn Hurtado, Mr. Marcus Williams, Camila Pritchett, Terrence Cribbs, Laurent. Did I hit everybody? Alicia Melton and Dr. Dorothy Jenkins Fields. We appreciate everyone. Y'all have a great day.
Jim Barber.
Thank you so much. All right, that's a wrap. Appreciate everyone. Take care. Goodbye.